Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Technology Accelerators. And today we're talking about design thinking and specifically why some people say it doesn't work. But then I'm going to get into how it does work and how I think that, well, I know design thinking is awesome. It's a really good way for building on innovation, getting to ideas quickly, and more importantly, solving problems. When we're faced with challenges, not sure how to work through a problem or a technical issue, design thinking is really good at brainstorming ideas. And the key thing about design thinking is it puts the user, the stakeholders, the people who actually benefit from the problem right at the center. Design thinking is called human-centered design for good reason, because it really focusing on making sure you have everyone involved, which sounds obvious. The amount of projects I work on where we've involved all the stakeholders, but in reality, we might have missed some. Design thinking really helps that. So today, we're going to come into why it doesn't work and how to do it the right way. And then we're going to get into a real case study that I did recently on using design thinking to accelerate a financial reporting process for a finance team. And that'll really bring this to life. So thanks again for your questions in advance. Always love getting your questions. That helps me create these sessions, and I know I'm adding more value by answering your questions. So keep them coming. Love answering your questions. So just before we dive into this, a quick history on design thinking, because it actually hasn't been around for as long as you might think. It actually appeared back in 2008, which for some of you may think that's a long time, but design thinking was in the 2008, and it came out of the need to focus more on the users after the whole dot-com early 2000s tech bubbles, very technology focused, a lot of expertise around the internet boom. Then we came into the financial crisis of 2008. And so there had to be a new way of designing products and making companies more efficient and coming up with better ways of solving problems. And that's where design thinking came in. And I really like using design thinking because it's a new way of coming into solving problems. It shakes up conventional thinking because typically we fall into old habits. We fall into the same ways of doing things, and we don't always think about how the best way to solve a problem. So design thinking is really good at making sure that we come up with a different way of thinking about it. There are three key elements to design thinking. It enables us to ask better questions. One of my favorite questions is how might we? It asks better questions. Secondly, it's diverse thinking because it involves more stakeholders, especially the users, the end users, but it makes sure you include everyone in that problem solving process. And that's often missed in traditional project management, even agile delivery. And then thirdly, it really immerses you into the experience of what does the end solution look like? How do we work through it, as opposed to just focusing on the problem, which is what we tend to do in the conventional thinking. We don't just rely on our expertise based on what we have seen before and what would and wouldn't work. So let's dive into this. Let's talk more about why design thinking doesn't work, and then we'll get into a case study about how it does work. So starting with why design thinking doesn't work. So firstly, there are a number of reasons. Sure, you've all seen some of these. I'd love to get your comments on what you're seeing around why design thinking doesn't work. And more importantly, why is innovation not working? Why is it difficult to get buy-in to your ideas? Because design thinking is a great technique for helping getting buy-in to new ideas. And we'll go into more detail on that in a second with a case study. But what I'm going to cover first is the 5 key reasons about why design thinking doesn't work and what a lot of people say around design thinking. So firstly, we're the experts. We know best. This is how we do things. It's often difficult to get out of our own heads. So we apply our own current set of biases, our own set of thinking, our own experiences, which often serves us well. However, when we're approaching a problem, thinking about it differently, coming at it from new angles is going to help solve that problem in a better way. It's going to be more creative, especially around innovation or challenging problems. When I was working through the financial close process, we just went back to, okay, do we hire more people? Do we reduce the number of days and make the team work to that target? It was conventional thinking. So when I introduced the design thinking, as you'll see in the next section, we introduced some new ways of working, new ways to come up with solving that problem of accelerating that month-end close. So again, the first one is design thinking gets us out of our own heads. Yes, we are experts, but we don't know everything. And bringing that diverse thinking is really, really important. And that's what design thinking does. The second reason why people say design thinking doesn't work is because there isn't enough time. They don't give it enough time. Like we have scarcity, there's cost reductions, people's availability is difficult. So we tend to say no, we don't add on to the workload. We don't have enough time. We're struggling to get through the day as it is. But true design thinking creates that alignment with all stakeholders. So you have to give it time. And again, when you look at comparing this design thinking process to standing up any other project or brainstorming any other problems, they probably still take the same amount of time, but when design thinkings won't run well, you do get a much better result. So people often say we don't have enough time or don't give it enough time and they don't see results. And that's to do with structure. And I'll come on to that next and give you the structure on how to make sure you get results quickly. Then the third reason is too many options. People say we come up with design thinking and then we're overwhelmed with choices. What do we do next? There's so many different ways we could solve this problem, so many different solutions. And that is true. What I do like about design thinking, it does come up with a lot of options. But when it's applied well and properly, it narrows down those solutions into very specific, the right questions that are going to give the right solutions that are going to give the right solution, but also the highest impact. And that's absolutely key because you have a lot of options coming out, but the design thinking process is a great way of narrowing down those too many options into the best, most high impact, highest value solution. The fourth reason why people say design thinking doesn't work is because it has a lack of focus. We're bouncing around too many ideas. We're going off track. We're going down rabbit holes we don't need to. But at the end of the day, lack of focus always comes down to framework, guidance, leadership. This is where we get into the who of any process, but particularly design thinking. You need that facilitator. You need someone to guide you through this process to get the best results. It's a new process for a lot of folks, even when a lot of teams who've used design thinking before, going through design thinking is new every time because you're solving a new problem with new people in a new way. So you've got to make sure you have that framework, the people lined up to facilitate it, and then that gives it the focus. So when people say it's too broad, too general, it's because they haven't got that framework and governance to make sure the design thinking process goes well. And then fifth, they're saying it doesn't deliver. We don't come up with a solution quickly. We spend too long in ideation and brainstorming and not coming up with a good solution quickly to solve the problem. And that is true, but you'll find that with many problems. It doesn't have to be design thinking. So what, again, comes back building on number 4 there and lack of focus. Any process can take a long time and doesn't deliver if it's not managed well. So design thinking is really good because it's learning in action. So we have to recognize that. And more importantly, we have to show the results along the way, even if it's just the interim updates on where we're moving down the prioritization of new ideas, coming up with a backlog of ideas to deliver on, and which ideas we're moving forward on. That comes down to good reporting, good stakeholder management, good communication updates. So again, not unique to design thinking. If something doesn't deliver, it's not being project managed well. So just remember that next time you get the criticism around design thinking doesn't deliver. So those are the 5 reasons why people say that design thinking doesn't work. We are the experts because they're too stuck in their own head around the biases. There's not enough time because you're not assigning the time to get to the right result. We have too many options. Where do we start? I need to boil it down. There's lack of focus because we don't have the framework or guidance to work with it properly. And it doesn't deliver because we're not seeing results quickly enough. All of these things are resolved with a good framework, a good process, a good methodology for delivering design thinking. So let's move into this. Let's now move into design thinking done right. And I love this because there are a lot of frameworks for design thinking, but I like to boil it down to 3 sections, 3 key areas, because this is an easy thing that any company can apply. It doesn't matter what size you are, any stage of a project, any stage of team maturity or involvement. This is really, really simple to do it in just 3 steps. There are other steps you can do. I've seen the 4-step version. I've seen a 5-step version, and they're all equally good as well. But if you're going to start anyway, start with these 3 steps. And this is built on the IBM design thinking methodology of observe, reflect, and make. So those are the three key steps that I really like in how you approach design thinking. Keep it simple: observe, reflect, and then make. And you'll notice there's a little infinity loop there in terms of moving through these cycles, starting with the observe, then into the reflect, then into the make. And then it goes back, because this is not a one and done. This is not a linear process. It can be chunked up into phases of delivery. But bottom line is, you need to keep working through this problem, keep solving it in different ways, keeps getting feedback from the users once it's delivered to ultimately improve it. So you're a continuous feedback loop of, once you observe something and reflect on it and make it, you then observe users in that new process and solution to then reflect and then make it better. So it's a continuous improvement loop. So let's just quickly break these down. When you're going through observe, you're actually immersing yourself in the world of your users. You're looking at the jobs to be done, their customer journey, and that's really important. I'm going to say that again. It's the jobs to be done and the customer journey. This is really understanding how you work with your users, how they work together, and then ultimately collecting and analyzing all the data to make sure that you have all the information, everything they're doing, everything they're working on, to ultimately build out into that new solution. And this is absolutely important, because we often forget this. This is why, if you're going to start anywhere, start on that observe. When you start with that customer journey, map through the process of beginning to end. When do I receive the report, all the way through to what do I do with the report? And then how do I update the report? Do that customer journey end to end. And I will, in a future session, do a much more deeper dive on that customer journey, because I love that model of looking through, observing on how customers and users actually work with products and tools. Then we move into reflect. This is where you take all the data, the customer journey, the jobs to be done, and then you come up with the ideas, the aha moments for how you could potentially solve a problem. Didn't realize we went through this process. So understanding, experiencing what the users do can really build new ways of thinking. I love the question here of how might we? This is the reflection on, this is the problem, so how might we solve this? A real simple example is that the reports were taking too long to produce, and the initial answer was that we need faster printers. Can you believe that? They wanted just to speed up the printers, whereas in reality, the aha moment was that we need to actually not even have printing of the report in the first place. We would put this onto the iPads and the laptops, so they didn't need to print the report. So the aha moment, or the how might we, is how do we prevent printing in the first place? And that was to make the dashboards easier to use, to zoom in, zoom out, make them more interactive, because at the moment they were statics, hence people were printing them. So this is really understanding how the users interact with the reports, and then you can start brainstorming and prioritizing the aha moments and the ways to solve it. And then you move into the make. The make is the final stage, where you start to actually test out, prototype, investigate further the solution you're making. So that in that example of the dashboard, we came up with the dashboard, then we got it in front of users quickly, got their feedback, understood how it could work, how they'd interact with it, how they'd work with it. And then we'd also set a time limit. Again, this can drag on and on and on. So back to that point earlier around design thinking can take too long and not produce results. The make stage has to have a time limit on when you're going to show results, keeping people informed to make sure you're capturing that initial goal during observe, all the way through to the delivering something. And you may run up against budget constraints here, and that's normal, because every idea solution has a budget constraint. So by having that knowledge of where you're heading towards, that tracking the progress, you can see if you're on track to deliver something within the time and the deadlines and the budget constraints you have. So those are the three stages that I love from the IBM design thinking around how you do design thinking right: observe, reflect, and make. So let's show a quick example of this. Let's show it in action based on a case that I did with a client just recently on accelerating their month-end close. They moved, shaving some days and cutting days out of their reporting process. So we'll start with observe. What happens today? So here is an example of the reporting process calendar, the reporting calendar. And we went through each stage, each section from day 0 all the way through to day 4, mapped out exactly what happens on every single day. As a result of that, we went through and looked at, okay, how might we make the process shorter? What are the issues we're facing? What do we need to change? What don't we like about the process? And what we found is we were spending too much time on the reporting and not enough time working with our business partners. The team were not able to free up time to work with the business partners to find out insights and help give a better service. They found that some of the data was coming in late. So on day 1, when the journal entries are put in, and we need to get that information from the business units on day 1, the morning of day 1, we were getting it late. So how might we get the journal entries in the month end ahead of time? That was one of the questions we asked. Also, one source of truth. A lot of the time here, especially towards the end of the cycle, was pulling data together from multiple sources. I'm sure we've all been there, where you have to go to different systems to get the data, have to combine different spreadsheets together and different data sources to come up with that one report. So how might we combine the data to make it easier to produce in the first place? How we draw it from one central source of truth? And ultimately the accuracy as well. There was data errors throughout the process, and it meant rework at every single step. So our questions were, how might we understand that those data errors, how they're corrected, and then ultimately what's important to the users right at the end, the financial statement report. What do they want to see out of this? Do they need to see this to a particular format? Do they need to see a particular set of numbers? So we got all that feedback by getting everyone together into a workshop session. Then we set the goals. Number one thing you must have coming out of the observe section is goals. How are you measuring the success of this piece of work? What do you want to achieve? In this case, it was free up time to spend on business partnering. So we're going to move from 10% all the way up to 90% time available was the goal. And we're going to shave a day and a half of effort off this financial close process. Those were the goals. We also wanted to create a culture of continuous improvement. So once we observed, looked through the current state, then we started asking the questions of how might we. So we moved into the reflect. Then we moved into reflect. How do we do things differently? And here you'll notice this grid. So I love this. This is where we start to organize our thinking. And folks, this works really well because you don't need to have a big formal project to do this. You can just get a few people together and start running this in 2, 3, 4 hours. It doesn't take a long time at all. The whole process can be done in less than a week just to accelerate that. You don't need to wait for a formal project or a big team together to do this. You don't need any special technology. So here we did this on a lot of free tools. I used a couple of online. This was done in a remote environment. So we did this online using the team's whiteboards. So we created this chart. So you look at the reflect to say, okay, of all our ideas, all our solutions, how do we categorize them? How do we prioritize them? And this is where there's 2 axes we need to worry about. One is the high risk versus low risk. So is the idea high risk, i.e., if we get this wrong, are we in trouble? Or if it's low risk, as in if we get it wrong, it's not ideal and we keep moving forward. And then the other axis is certainty. How certain are we that this would work? Whereas how uncertain are we around it? Might it not work? So with these 2 axes, we start to plot out our ideas. So how might we improve the data and get a central source of truth for all our data? We had an idea around that to consolidate it into one spreadsheet based on a number of other automated scripts to pull the data into one place, and then that would go into a Power BI dashboard. The certainty around that was certain because we had some Power BI skills on the team. We had some folks who knew Python to bring in the automation from the ERP system of loading the data. The risk was also lower, I should say, because at the end of the day, we knew we could produce this pretty quickly. And if it went wrong, we would just revert back to the current spreadsheet and the current reporting. So we had a backup plan. So that was just one example of the ideas. But what we did is, just as an example here, we started to plot all the ideas. We got the team to do this. Again, this is not one person doing it. It's not that expert doing this on behalf of other people. This is getting everyone involved, from users all the way up to leadership. have everyone involved, putting ideas, just stick them up there. Then we go through it as a team. Again, we put a time limit on this, just do it for maybe 5-10 minutes, keep it quick. Like the rapid fire nature of this gets the ideas out quickly. Then we go through it and start to group it. So ideally, you want to focus in that lower left quadrant there, the lower risk, higher certain ideas. But you might have different groups because there might be related ideas. So not only are you grouping the certainty and the risk, you're also grouping ideas together because people may have very similar ideas. What we found with the mapping of the data is there were two sets of working papers. The same mapping solution would actually solve the problem for both working papers. So we grouped that together because the automation of the data load would actually work for both working papers. So then once you've grouped them together, that's going to give you automatic prioritization. Again, very, very, very simple because it gives you a prioritization straight away. And then after you've reflect, you move into the make. This is when you might start making it real. Again, start moving into, okay, let's test this out. Let's look back at our goals. So again, remember back in the observe phase, we set the goals. Now we need to make something to achieve those goals. So we start to prototype and test. So this is really quick. You want to move fast on this. It's not really suited to big projects where you're doing a big systems implementation, but it is suited to chunks of those projects or small projects in their own right. So I love design thinking for just getting moving quickly and understanding how to solve a problem. But then you can also apply it to phases of a project. So if you're in a design phase of a project and you want to brainstorm the requirements for how you set up the new user interface on an ERP system, you can just break out on this design thinking process for that one requirement, that one problem you need to solve. And again, we'd involve the vendor, the users, the leadership. That's the key with this, that user-centered design. Remember that from the beginning. Design thinking is about that user-centric. What does the end user see out of this? So in this example with the month-end reporting and accelerating that process, we focused on exporting the data in an automated way into a spreadsheet, which then took it up to Power BI. So we automated that data flow. We tested it quickly, got it up and running within a week at a quick trial, a quick prototype. Then we realized the mapping was good. So we actually then rolled it out for the next month end. So we were actually able to stand up a working prototype and test it within a month, which was really, really good because then we could refine it the next month end. And then by the third month end, it was productionized. We were using it. And that was a really quick way of doing it. So in my experience, what you'll see is that some ideas you'll solve some ideas very, very quickly. And that's the whole point of in the reflect stage is focus on the ones that are certain, lower risk, because you'll build momentum really quickly around some of the easier ideas. Then it will start to tail off. You'll notice that you'll start to get a bit of fatigue around some of the ideas, and that's normal. So what you do is then remember that infinite loop back to the observe and reflect. And that's why you go back, because when you start to see the ideas starting to tail off or moving into more higher risk or uncertain ideas, go back to observe. Is there anything we're missing? Based on what we've put in place, what we've changed, what are people doing differently? Because that'll surface some new ideas. And that's the beauty of this. This is where you get to that continuous improvement, because you're the first set of ideas you implement, you build on that, and then you observe, reflect, and make based on the new set of ideas. And that's where you start to raise the whole maturity and start to innovate on a more consistent basis. And that's why I love design thinking, because it builds on it. And again, it's very easy to do because you don't need a big project to do this. Any team can do this tomorrow. Just get in a room, get the right people talking, get some whiteboards going online or in a meeting room, just throw up the ideas and then make them and test them going forward from that. The other thing is getting buy-in to these ideas. So big challenge around any project is getting approval, getting sign-off. Design thinking is a really good way to get that sign-off from leadership around buy-in to new ideas, because when they're involved in the decision-making all the way through, they're involved in the observe, they're involved in the reflect, they're involved in the make. They see the process end to end. They're providing ideas for how to solve the problem. They're seeing the user's pain. They're understanding the problems right from the beginning. So they're bought in all the way through. As a result, everyone's aligned, everyone's moving towards that one goal you want to solve, which you set up in the observe stage. So that's my summary of design thinking. That's why I've seen people say it doesn't work, and this is how to make it work. And ultimately, it's like any project or any initiative, you can do it much smaller, but track the progress, show your success, keep people involved, and you report your progress along the way. So I hope that was helpful. I love design thinking. Always like to chat more about this. Always feel free to drop me a chat or a DM if you have any questions at all. And if you want to talk more about the design thinking process or how to automate your month end close and how to shave at least 2 to 3 days off that process and automate as much as possible, then reach out to me. I'd love to share more knowledge on that, and also just have a quick brainstorming with you, and we can do a mini design working session, design thinking working session with you as well. And until next time, we'll see you in the next Technology Accelerator video.